definitely the US is standing in this conflict. This is an excellent formula for the conflict. And that's why I think Rada is very accurate when she says, Palestinians are so alone that they have to have us because they won't have any of those states for a long time. Now remember that people who had nothing to do with South Africa in the 60s, 70s and 80s came out in the hundreds of millions in support of the end of apartheid. They had nothing to do with apartheid, but they understood that in a world where apartheid rules, they are not free. And Nelson Mandela understood that when he said, building on that understanding, we are not free as long as Palestine is not free. This small country, insignificant, far away, yeah? Few million people. Why is it so important? It's important in the same way that South Africa is important. It has become an icon, not just for the fight against the injustice that Israel has created, but the larger injustices that are represented thereby. The neo-colonial project, the American Century project, the right wing across Europe, North America, and some other parts, unfortunately, that is actually using Israel as its chosen agent in so many ways. Remember that Israel is selling arms to more than 100 countries. The exact number is not known because you have to read quite a lot of publication, put them together. Israel refuses to give either numbers or names of countries. However, Jane's and other publications put together the picture. Israel is either the fourth or the fifth largest arms exporter in the world, and is either the fourth or the fifth largest, most powerful army in the world. The Israeli army is slightly larger, actually not slightly larger, than the British army. Israel is a country of 6 million Israeli Jews, and Britain is a country of 65 million people. And Britain has the smaller army. You do remember Britain is involved in a number of places outside of Ireland. Yeah?
Yes.
Very unfortunate involvement, of course. Israel is fighting Palestinians without arms, without tanks, without guns, without all that, and it has this army, which is the fifth in the world. So you have to ask yourself, what is this about? What are they doing with 400, reportedly, nuclear arms? Who are they going to use them on? In what conditions might they use them? Where and why? Is this making sense? It's not making sense more than Britain having nuclear arms, but actually it's even more ludicrous. But of course, with 400 nuclear arms, the Europeans listen to you in a way that they don't listen to Palestine. So there is a formulation here, which I would call the military-industrial academic complex. The Americans invented the MIC. The MIC was a very important concept and a very important player in global politics and in global economy ever since the Second World War. The combining of the military and industry, which the Americans have developed as a unique system, was very important, and it was followed, and still is followed by Britain, for example. But Israel has added to this the third leg of the academic involvement, which of course is very necessary, because now the academics are the most important people in the military-industrial complex anywhere. Who has developed the machineries that the NSA and GCHQ is using on us? Most of those technologies were developed in the Technion and Tel Aviv University. 7 army officers in Israel have developed a system, because I'm under the weather, I don't remember its name now, which is actually the perfect system for giving you a picture of anybody in a city, a modern city, using all the cameras, all the electronic links, all the communication systems based on the telephones, on the global positioning system, etc. They have combined this, and last year have started selling it to large cities. You know, the Chinese cities are all buying it. This is a system that allows you to know where every citizen is. So when you read about the NSA and what it does, a lot of it actually comes from Israel for obvious reasons. Israelis know exactly who does what in Gaza. Yeah, they don't need to be there. They are in the air. They have electronic means on the ground, in the sea. They have developed this, and then selling it is a very lucrative business, like the drones which they have developed. Who has developed all this? Of course, academics like us. That if you ask them what they work on, will describe it as communications projects, as civil airport development, as urban security projects. Tel Aviv University is working on hundreds of projects which are to do with the military. And I choose just one because I really like it. A project which was described as medical, which is analysis of the sweat of people under interrogation. Interrogation is a clean word for torture, of course, and you can just imagine what this is about. So this is an EU project. Can you imagine? You're paying for it. You will be pleased to know. And you're paying for hundreds of others, which are described in terms that look like nothing is wrong with it. It's either medical, or it's civic, or it's communication. Under mathematics, they put a lot of the NSA projects. So the concept that Israel has developed is basically centered on the military, but academia is the most important part. Why is it centered on the military? Having lived in Britain since 1972, I know how the class system works in Britain very well. I'm sure you do. So the British elite is educated in the interestingly named public schools, which of course are nothing like public, yeah? So this is where basically boys come together to run Britain. Look at the government we now have. It's a public school boy government. I don't know how Ireland figures in this. I really don't know. I suspect not the same way. Yeah? So actually, the British system is quite unique in terms of how economic it is in organizing the elite. The Americans have their own system. The system in Israel is a military, industrial, academic system. This is the elite of Israel. This is the elite that makes the Israeli economy tick. And of course, like any military system, it has to have laboratories. I don't mean laboratories in a room like this where people are using electrodes. No, I mean bigger laboratories. They're called Lebanon, they're called Gaza, they're called the West Bank, they're called Syria, Iraq, Sudan. These are the laboratories of Israel. This is where they test everything that they produce, and on the selling literature, you read tested in action. You don't need to say where, yeah? We know. And they can sell it because everyone knows where it was tested. It was tested on Palestinians in the main. It was tested on Arabs in the main. It was tested on the south of Lebanon. It was tested in Syria, in Iraq, and in Africa. So basically, what Israel has developed is something that even the Americans look at with, with wonder, because they only later started pulling academia so centrally into the military-industrial complex, while in Israel this was there from the very beginning. I would say even before the creation of the state. That concept of universities being a total part of the fighting for the colonial project were there, and that's why the Technion and the Hebrew University were the first two institutions to be created in Mandate Palestine by Zionism. It was very important to have them. At the same time that the Haganah was created, they created those organizations because there was no distinction between the jobs that need to be done by the military part, by the academic part, and by the industrial part. And I want to give you a few examples to conclude. I worked in 4 Israeli universities in different points in time, and not one of them was run by civilians. The last 2 I worked in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Sapir College. I was dean and a professor in both. And in Israel, academics sometimes hold 3 jobs. Don't ask me how we do it, but I did it, and I'm still alive. Just now, of course, it's nonsensical, but that's how the system is working. It's a highly privatized system, and both universities were run by army officers. And when the Second Intifada started, as Dean of Communication, I felt it necessary to have an analysis of the incredible way in which the Israeli media treated Palestinians during the uprising, which was, rather as described that. So we called for a conference, and I didn't ask the VC. I mean, do you ask your VC when you call for a conference? I don't. We called for a conference, which was actually very successful. And I was frog marched in front of the VC, who was supposedly my friend, who's supposedly a liberal, who's supposedly left-wing. And he said to me, "What do you think you're doing?" I said, "What?" He said, "What's this conference about? Are you mad? Do you know what you're doing to the university?" So I said, "Are you asking me this as my VC, or are you asking me that as a general and my commanding officer? I needed an answer to this because my answer will depend on yours." And he couldn't answer that because in his own mind, the 2 roles were the same. What's the difference? I'm a VC because I'm a general. So all 9 Israeli universities are run by the army personnel when they leave. Now I ask you, how many universities in Ireland are run by generals? I also ask you how many universities in other parts of Europe are run by generals. And while we're at it, how many governments in the world are run by generals where the cabinet is made of 2/3 of army personnel? I can think of one which we don't hold as democratic, which is called Egypt, which of course we know what those generals have done in the uprising in Egypt. And Israelis talk about this dismissively, those Egyptians, military dictatorship, etc. Well, what is Israel then? There are more Israeli generals in the Israeli different governments than there were ever in Egypt. So it's very easy to see why it is wrong somewhere else, but they never look at, and rather it's totally right. At the point that the Israeli society will rise and say the occupation is wrong, is not one that we should wait for. We need to bring it about, but we should not wait for a change from within. I think this is very important to understand, that what you're told about the Israeli academia being the leadership of liberal-minded people in Israel, they are against the occupation, they are demonstrating and so on. Well, Ronit and I were many times on those demonstrations, and we know there's 185 people personally, and we can name them, we like them, we hate them, but that's it. That's what there is. And when during the attack on Gaza, brutal as this was, and useless as it was, of course, all Israeli academics were sent a survey about their positions on this, and there are about 15 to 16,000 of them. So all of them had the survey. 405, less than 3% of them signed a declaration against what is happening in Gaza. They didn't even sign against the occupation. That is, one bridge too far. So what we're talking about is not a liberal democracy. What we're talking about is not a democracy at all. What we're talking about is an ethnocracy, an ethnic democracy, or if you want, this is a herrenfolk democracy, which is what sociologists have termed it like. In that sense, it's like South Africa. It's a herrenfolk democracy. And I think Ronit reminds me that this is the point to finish. So thank you for all that you have done in the year since Academic for Palestine has started. It gives a great support for people in Palestine to know that Ireland, where British imperialism has started and has failed so badly and has been so brutal, has joined Palestine is very heartening for us.